I'm reading today a review of Richard Goldschmidt's The Material Basis of Evolution from 1940. I came to Goldschmidt's book having only two associations with his name, a distinction between microevolution and macroevolution, and the term hopeful monsters. I found the former to be central to his thinking. His book is divided into two parts, headed respectively microevolution and macroevolution. The phrase hopeful monsters he employs mainly in his final chapter as an expression of his despair at ever plumbing the mysteries of macroevolution, how most evolution works. Reading his book is like visiting a foreign country, so greatly has genetics changed in the 84 years since it was published. His thinking is dominated by the concept of mutation as recovered from Mendel's work just 40 years before. As I recall of Mendel, by accident he settled on species of plants in which variation did correspond to individual genes. He also made much of finding a single species of plant taking on two very different forms, suggesting evolution could proceed through huge leaps. Goldschmidt's work involved having to cope with these two misleading findings of Mendel. His success contributed to making these issues seem to us like ancient history. If Goldschmidt has a message for us today, I think it is his sharp distinction between microevolution and macroevolution. Microevolution he limited to changes of genes within a species, for which he was prepared to credit natural selection and genetic mutation. By macroevolution, he meant the evolution of new kinds of creatures, involving the creation of new genes by entirely different processes. He emphatically declared that mutation among existing genes cannot result in the creation of new genes. But he never found the process he was looking for, and he failed to impress his fellow evolutionists with his value of his approach. Until a few years earlier, Goldschmidt had published only in German, and his prose in English is ponderous. Most of his book is taken up with detailed accounts of research, much of his own, through which geneticists grappled with Mendel's biases. I had to skim, trying to pick out from the sea of detail the odd paragraphs of commentary. Some quotes. Microevolution by accumulation of micromutations, we may also say neo-Darwinian evolution, is a process which leads to diversification strictly within the species, usually, if not exclusively, for the sake of adaptation of the species to specific conditions within the area which it is able to occupy. The facts of microevolution do not suffice for an understanding of macroevolution. It is hardly to be assumed that man and amoeba may be connected by mutation of the same genes. Now his hopeful monster thinking. Wishful thinking. It is gratifying that all the disciplines which furnish material for the understanding of evolution supply ample and parallel evidence for the theory of evolution which is more plausible than the neo-Darwinian theory. The facts which we have discussed thus far led step by step to the conclusion that we must look for a genetic agency able to accomplish separation of species without slow accumulation of gene mutations. And the idea of the reaction system means that the germplasm as a whole controls the general features of development. This idea dispenses completely with the individual gene and its individual action. It consists only of a single unit action of the whole germplasm, with more or less independent action of individual chromosomes. End of quote. How far he is from discovering this system can be judged by his assuming chromosomes consist of proteins. I felt a pang of pity for him for how far he was from modern understanding of the genome. He never found the key to macroevolution, evolution of new genes leading to new kinds of creatures. Schmidt warns against being seduced by mathematical formulations of evolution. Of such formulations, he says, they are, quote, decisive only if the neo-Darwinian viewpoint of evolution by accumulation of micromutations is taken for granted. End of quote. Are we in danger of being seduced by such a viewpoint? Dawkins' selfish gene?